Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into chapter 4 of our source text. And honestly, it's an absolutely fascinating read. We're going to unpack a story that beautifully blends practical engineering, natural science, and the actual birth of mythology. We often tend to think of ancient history as either purely factual or completely mythical, right? But what we're about to see is how one kingdom's desperate struggle for survival led to monumental building projects and ultimately turned real-world heroes into literal gods. To really get what's happening here, we have to put ourselves in their shoes for a second. The land has been completely ravaged by drought. The desperation is real. The text puts us right inside the head of an engineer named Shesh Naga. The memory of all this devastation is weighing incredibly heavily on him. He realizes that living without water is just unbearable, and he makes a firm decision. In the future, this kind of suffering absolutely must be avoided. So it's not magic that kicks off this story. It's an engineer looking at a massive crisis and deciding to take immediate action. And he doesn't just sit around. He takes massive, monumental action. While another key figure, Takshaka, was busy building a giant mountain stupa, Shesh started constructing a huge reservoir right next to it. He literally laid the foundation stone himself. His goal was crystal clear. Water had to flow into this reservoir to benefit the people for a long, long time to come. So we have this incredible dual effort happening at the exact same time. You've got the building of a spiritual monument on one hand, paired perfectly with the construction of vital, life-saving water infrastructure on the other. Right in the middle of all this grueling, back-breaking construction, the text shifts to this incredibly relatable human moment. A young kid, obviously just tired of the relentless dry heat, asks his dad a simple question. When is this drought going to end? Are we ever going to get rain? The father just looks up at the sky, smiles calmly, and gives this deeply hopeful, prophetic answer. He tells his child that the second the work at the Mahiyangana temple is finished, no matter where they are, rain is going to fall. The gods will call it forth, and it won't just be a drizzle either. It's going to be a heavy, life-giving rain. He directly ties the end of their suffering to the completion of this massive construction project. But the dad doesn't just give a vague, someday kind of answer. He gets highly specific. He talks about a celestial event, the arrival of Dia Sen, that needs to happen for this heavy rain to arrive. This is so interesting because it shows us how deeply intertwined the weather was with ancient astrology. The people of this time didn't just look at the clouds to predict the weather, they were actively looking at the stars to understand their climate and their fate. In fact, the text meticulously maps out the exact planetary alignments the father believed would summon Dia Sen to Earth. We're talking the sun in Leo, the moon in Aries, the whole shebang. This wasn't just random guesswork, it was a highly complex cosmological clock. It really highlights this developed astronomical tradition, where they believe the movements of celestial bodies were directly linked to major earthly events, like finally breaking a devastating drought. Okay, so moving past the astrology, the kid does what kids do best. He keeps asking questions. Driven by pure curiosity, he pushes the conversation further and asks a super practical, mechanical question. Father, how will this rain come? He doesn't just care about the when, he wants to know the how. And the answer he gets is remarkably scientific, especially when you realize it's coming right on the heels of an astrological prophecy. The dad's answer brilliantly lays out the natural water cycle. He explains it step by step. First, the sun intensifies the heat until the earth turns red and the water vaporizes. Then, that vapor is carried by the wind, rises up to fill the sky with clouds, and finally, those very clouds bring the rain back down to earth. These early civilizations clearly had a firm observational grasp on evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. It's a beautifully holistic worldview, with science and spirit coexisting without skipping a beat. All right, let's fast forward to the climax of Chapter 4. The massive construction projects are finally complete. The pond is done, the Chaitya is done, and the day arrives for a huge procession. People from all over the kingdom gather to bring the sacred relic to the newly finished Mahiyangana Chaitya. You can just feel the anticipation building in the text here. The prophecy said that completion would bring the rain. The work is done. The relic is being placed. Literally all eyes are on the sky. And then a great marvel happens. Just like the father prophesied to his child, right during the event of placing the sacred relic, the crowd looks up in total amazement. Rain clouds actually start forming directly above the Chaitya. The sky darkens, small raindrops start to fall on the upturned faces of the crowd. Slowly, that little drizzle turns into a heavy, pouring rain. The kingdom goes wild celebrating. The text even notes that people were shedding tears of pure happiness, and those tears were literally mixing with the rainwater hitting the ground. It's just an incredibly cinematic moment of absolute relief. You can imagine the sheer gratitude in the aftermath of a miracle like that. The people of the country were profoundly thankful. And who did they thank? They directed all this gratitude straight to the historic leaders who made this victory over the drought possible: Astika, Shesh, Vasuki, and Takshaka. The text makes a point to explicitly note that these figures were all descendants of the Sun dynasty. They were real, flesh-and-blood leaders, engineers, and builders who organized the massive infrastructure that saved their entire kingdom. And here is where it gets really mind-blowing. This immense gratitude, it literally triggered the birth of a myth. This is the exact moment history transitions into legend. Because of their incredible feats, these real-world figures were deified. Takshaka, who led the creation of the Chaitya, became revered as Indra, the god of rain. Shesh, our reservoir builder, became known as Varuna, the god of water. And Vasuki, who somehow aided in the water vapor process, was worshipped as Ravana, or the god of Katargama. It goes to show that ancient mythological gods often have their roots in brilliant historical human beings. Their achievements were just so massive they were remembered as divine. Now, while these engineers were basically becoming gods in the eyes of the people, the text tells us Prince Astika was on a slightly different path. He was busy attaining enlightenment near the area of Sigiriya. But this wasn't just some detached spiritual journey. His enlightenment was paired with serious practical progress. The text explicitly states that he contributed significantly to the gradual development of the kingdom's agriculture. Once again, we see this perfect pairing in the ancient text: spiritual growth acting as a direct catalyst for practical societal survival. And the legacy of this era was incredibly long-lasting. Prince Astika's hair relics were actually preserved at that very Mahiyangana Chaitya we've been talking about. Following his enlightenment, the teachings of the Buddha spread not just through the Astika kingdom, but eventually across the entire world. Over time, as these sacred relics were enshrined, Chaityas built in his honor evolved and spread globally. They became permanent monuments, eternal places of reverence, honor, and devotion. What started as a local success story of surviving a drought completely blossomed into a global spiritual legacy. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about this dynamic from Chapter 4. We started with an engineer digging a reservoir to survive a drought, and we ended up with the creation of water gods and global religious monuments. How incredible is it that human ingenuity, practical construction, and natural weather events can completely transform into divine myths over time? It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other ancient gods, across all sorts of cultures, might actually just be brilliant engineers, leaders, and scientists whose real-world achievements have been lost to the mists of history? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this one.